So let's talk about the new Shira cartoon before it gets a little too old, since the finale was already a couple of weeks ago. So, not a fan, and probably not for the reasons that you're guessing. So I grew up as a massive fan of He-Man, Masters of the Universe, the original Shira, that entire franchise, and my entire teenage and adult life, constantly checking in, seeing new developments, what's going on, right? So let's see if I can make this not terribly rambly and a little quicker. So, right, 1983, they bring out the He-Man cartoon. The year before, they had released the toys. So I was a He-Man baby. I was born the year the toys were released. And then after that, we get the Shira cartoon. The original Shira cartoon was actually better written than the He-Man cartoon. Now, it was still essentially a 30-minute toy commercial, which is fine when you're aiming things at children. They're really not mentally prepped to handle real heavy, deep psychological issues. So you're going to have fairly thin toys, or fairly thin storylines, and of course the merchandising was huge at that point. Then we get the Masters of the Universe movie, which I personally love and is actually a pretty good movie. Yes, it does fall short of the franchise, the world that it that was built and all of that, but it's not a terrible movie, and Dolph Lundgren is actually a pretty good choice for He-Man, especially back in the day. And then in 1990 we get the He-Man reboot that nobody wanted, that nobody asked for, with the New Adventures of He-Man. Not a great series. And it's not even that everything in there was terrible, but there was a lot of things that were not done well. And then, 2002, 2003, something like that, we get the Mike Young Productions He-Man series, and it was actually fantastic. They went deep with the lore, and the animation, the artwork was excellent. They did a lot of things really, really, really well in that series. And from there, we kind of had a dead spot for a while, which, whatever, right? A series can't last forever, and for the last 15 years, probably longer, there have been rumblings of a new movie, whatever. And so the collector toy market has been going on all this time, but for the most part, we hadn't had anything new for a long time. And then they announced, the new Shira series. Well, this is the reboot that nobody asked for. The reboot is essentially a Tumblr fanfic, and you can already see the problem with that. But the biggest problem, honestly, was the art style was not good. The art style was overly simplistic compared to what we originally got. The animation itself was give or take. I mean, it was smooth. It wasn't choppy. That was, fine. The CG blended pretty well with it, for the most part. Not terribly bad, but the artwork was really not good. And then the first blow was struck when they introduced Swiftwind. Swiftwind was atrocious. He was this noble steed in the original, and it was a good character that almost seemed a little like he had a little bit of the wisdom of the ancients and everything in him, and in this they turned him into just a ridiculous joke, and I can't forgive them for that. And so despite the fact that I didn't like the artwork, I didn't like a lot of the redesigns, the power sword was terrible. I didn't like the bicycle shorts. The full pants new suit that they did in the last season was a million times better than the bicycle shorts and skirt thing that Shira was wearing. So a lot of it was just like the oversimplified designs were not good. And so despite that, I kind of hate watched it through the series because, well, you know, I'm a fan of the property and I want to support the property because that's a fandom that I actually care about. And they did some things well. I mean, you know, they didn't do everything poorly. Some of the characterizations were actually improvements. Madame Raz, fantastic improvement on the character. I actually think Catra's characterization added some depth that was not there before, and that was fantastic. You know, I actually kind of liked Entrapta in this. A lot of people were complaining about her, but I actually kind of liked her, you know, the more whimsical variant of her there. I really kind of liked her in that role. You know, as far as any like the social justice stuff they brought in there, it was a little ham-fisted, but I will say this, and this is something that I think is very important to say. Bringing in, you know, the gay, queer, whatever you want to call them, the LGBTQ plus characters, they actually handled pretty well. I mean, other than the final "I love you" moment in the finale, which I thought was a little ham-fisted, that wasn't who the character was. It was just a fact about the character, but it was not any character's sole personality. And that's exactly how it's supposed to be treated. If you want things to be normalized, you treat them as normal. You don't make them stand out. Things that stand out are inherently not going to be seen as normal. And so anything that you want normalized has to be treated as if it was just there all along and is just the way things are. And so in that regard, I actually think that was a fine portrayal of it. Oh yeah, not that Seahawk was particularly great in the original, but man, he was a blundering oaf in this one. Not good. So all in all, right, it just, they spent a lot of time doing things that seemed like they were just doing them for the sake of you know, diversity representation and not for the sake of storytelling. It seemed like they tried to really downplay male characters as being lesser than the female characters, which I don't think you need to do to promote female empowerment. You know, you can absolutely promote the idea of equality, egalitarianism, those kind of things, without debasing other people. You don't need to elevate people at the expense of others, if that makes sense to you. It's a problematic way of behaving, of trying to flip the script per se. And again, I'm all for giving girls powerful role models. In fact, I am the first person to say that I don't think anybody should be weak. I think being volitionally weak is a moral issue as well as a functional utilitarian issue. And so the concept of creating more strong, independent people who voluntarily associate with each other for mutual benefit, I think is a far more powerful message than just putting certain people into subclasses and certain people in elevated classes. I don't think that's a particularly useful way to go about it. And, you know, so, I mean, long story short, it was, while they did some things well, it was largely a swing and a miss, maybe a first base hit. They didn't nail it. They just didn't nail it. And the fact is that all the press on the back end of it was twice as much this screeching howler monkey stuff as the series itself was. The creators and those involved spent so much more time screaming at people for disliking some of those aspects of the show than actually promoting the positive aspects. they actually kind of shot themselves in the foot and screwed up their own cause. Now, some people really, really did love the show, and that's fine. I am not the demographic for that show. I'm not an 8-year-old girl looking to buy Shira toys, although 8-year-old girls weren't buying the Shira toys either. Those toys kind of sat on the shelf and gathered dust, so bad merchandising there. But one of my students, 14-year-old girl, she actually grew up watching reruns of the original Shira, and so when the new one came out, she tried to watch it, and she didn't like it at all. And nobody told her that it was good or bad. She told me that without me saying anything about it. And so we have to be honest about some of this stuff, that like sometimes trying to shoehorn certain messages and agendas and whatnot into our entertainment actually just diminishes the entertainment. One of the great things about the original is they didn't really seem to try to shoehorn too much in other than product placement. And here's the cool thing, right? Like, yes, everybody deserves to be represented in popular media, but no creator is obligated to represent anybody else. So, if you want to be represented, you write your own stories, or you hire people to write stories for you. And in this case, they did. I think that by trying to co-opt existing properties and reboot them, I think is maybe not the best of all ideas, because all that is trying to piggyback off of somebody else's success to try to bring your message forward rather than creating something new and original. But one of the things that we also have to recognize is that we have some studies showing that, and I'll see if I can link something below regarding this. Representation does not statistically seem to matter as far as real-world outcomes and attitudes go. There doesn't seem to be any positive correlation to representation and cultural changes in the real world. Now, it's a very, very complex issue, but again, all that I'm pointing to there is that shoehorning essentially token characters into a storyline, or adding token traits to characters in a storyline, is not the way to go about it, because if the representation itself doesn't really matter, and on top of that, token representation may in fact cause some problems, then we're going about it the wrong way. I'm all for you throwing any kind of character into a story as long as you're writing a good story. So, that's all I'm saying about the new Shira cartoon, and I'm hoping that the two Masters of the Universe He-Man cartoons that are coming up on Netflix, both the CG one and Kevin Smith's adaptation, I hope both of those are much better representations of the property, and I hope that going forward the movie that Sony was producing and now is in flux a little bit, I hope that is every bit as good. Right? The original properties were extremely diverse. The original properties had all of these messages about being good to each other and treating people as equals, and even representing different races and creeds and lifestyles and whatnot. The original cartoons did a really good job of that. So it doesn't need to be this ham-fisted affair that it's becoming. We don't need to stand on the rooftops yelling and screaming until we're red in the face, because it just doesn't do the trick. So I'm going to stop ranting because I have gone on long enough, and I will talk to you guys later. Good journey.